Welcome back. I'm here today with Roger Royse. He is the founder of Royse Law Firm. Roger, welcome to today's show.
Thanks, Alan. Good to be back.
So, Roger, I understand that your firm was recently named as one of the top law firms in Silicon Valley.
The San Jose Silicon Valley Business Journal, they have and you've heard of the Book of Lists, and they have an annual list of law firms. And it's about a year ago now that we finally made the list. We've been growing pretty quickly since I formed the firm about 8 years ago, and we're up to 20 lawyers now in all different areas of practice for small business and startup companies.
Now, your firm specializes in you deal with a lot of companies, but you have a niche practice in a lot of the startups.
A big part of what we do is startup company and emerging growth, primarily because our main office is in Palo Alto, but also because we have a pretty deep bench in technology law, corporate securities, M&A, and financings. So yeah, I would say a pretty big part of the practice has to do with startups.
Well, being right in the heart of Silicon Valley, can you give us a feel for what's happening out there right now? Word on the street with companies and...
Well, everything goes in cycles, and California, this part of California anyway, has its own little cycle, its own little bubble that seems to be immune from the rest of the world to some extent. And you could call what's going on right now to be a bit frothy. There's lots of companies are getting funded, lots more are being formed, and there seems to be a lot more money in the market chasing those companies than there have been in recent years. So it's a pretty good environment for startup companies right now.
Now, you talk about funding companies currently the new trend is in crowdfunding.
Yeah, that's a big deal. It's what we've been hearing a lot of, and we're certainly one of the pioneers in terms of understanding the new laws and doing presentations, conferences, and white papers on. In fact, I was in Washington, D.C. last fall at the SEC when they finalized regulations on one aspect of the Jobs Act. But it's important to know there's as much misinformation as information about the crowdfunding rules out there right now. But nevertheless, we have had some recent law changes that have freed up billions of dollars for startup investment that wasn't there before. And we're seeing the effects of that. The business models and the technology is catching up to the law, and there are certainly several websites and portals that help facilitate angel investing under the new crowdfunding rules.
As an attorney, how do you help your clients through the crowdfunding and legal documents? Or is there any special process that you walk them through?
There's no shortage of lawyers in Palo Alto, and there's no shortage of good lawyers. In fact, almost anybody can. It's not hard to walk up and down Page Mill Road or Embarcadero, where I am, and find somebody who can help a company with the legal aspects of a securities placement. But here in Silicon Valley, we try to take a little bit more of an expansive role. And it's not just so much, how do we dot I's and cross T's? I think there's a lot more strategy that has to be involved. And in fact, a lot of the speaking and presentations that I give are part of the legal aspects. And I'm a lawyer, so part of my day is law. But another part is strategy. Who do you want as your investors? How much money should you get? Should you stage your financing? Should you be doing a crowdfunding, or should you be going right to the institutions? It's things like that. I mean, that's where lawyers add a lot of value to a process, much more than just shuffling paper.
From your perspective, what does the future hold for crowdfunding?
We are eventually going to see that democratization of the process. I think that we are going to see a lot more players entering the market in terms of investors, angel investors, and having a lot of access to a lot of great companies. And that's going to necessarily increase the quality of the companies that are going to get funded. There's just going to be more competition. There's more money. More competition for that money because it's a lot easier for companies to get out there and get in front of them now. So I think crowdfunding is, as technology has done in a lot of different areas, for crowdfunding, it's going to allow people to connect from places where they might not have been able to connect in the real world before.
At what point in time is it appropriate for a startup company to get involved with an attorney?
Well, I think as soon as possible, of course. Certainly, at the point that the company is going to engage in any conduct, so it can do some asset protection, any business conduct, business activities that might result in liability, and this is California, so it doesn't take much to result in liability, as you know, at the point where it's going to be creating any intellectual property broadly defined, technology, trade secrets, anything like that, because we need a vehicle that can collect those rights. And at the point where it's going to divide up equity or make arrangements with other stakeholders, founders, advisors, consultants, things like that. And that any of those things are going to happen pretty early in an enterprise's life. So I think a company needs a lawyer pretty early.
I'm visiting here today with Roger Royse. He is the founder of the Royse Law Group right here in Silicon Valley. Roger, we need to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
I love fishing, with my family.
I think it would be easier to use a net.
It was so much fun.
The times when we are together, it makes it all the more worth it.
Having Dad teach them how to cast a fly rod, and
as long as we're doing stuff together, we're having fun.
Some people see a father and a son fishing together, while others see a succession plan. Welcome back. I'm here today with Roger Royse, and he's the founder of the Royse Law Group right here in Silicon Valley, ranked by the Silicon Valley Business Journal as one of the top law firms here. Roger, recently you held a pitch event, here in Silicon Valley for new startup companies coming in. Can you give us more information? How did that go, and give us some background on the companies that showed up?
I do that fairly frequently because one of the, I spend a pretty big part of my day with my client companies asking me to introduce them to investors. And maybe I can do that, but with a pitch event, you've got a captive audience of investors as judges. They're going to listen to you. They're going to give you your chance to tell them about your company, anywhere from 1 or 2 minutes to 5 minutes. And then if they're interested, they'll ask follow-up questions. That's the beauty of a pitch event. So we do that periodically. It gives everybody an opportunity that we let into the pitch event to actually get in front of these companies. The one we did recently was a little bit different concept. We opened it up to anybody who wanted to sign up, but they only had 1 minute to tell their story. We had 60 companies come over. We had a panel from Garage, from Draper Fisher, from Angels Forum, and Dream Funded, SF Angel. So we had a pretty powerful panel of investors, and we had 60 companies come through with their 1 minute pitches. So it was quite an evening, and several of them came back, were invited back to give an extended pitch, and several of them I know have been contacted by the investors, and they followed up, and we'll see what happens out of that.
How innovative are these companies coming out? What are there trends that you're seeing?
We're in the heart of innovation here in Silicon Valley, I think, and that's the best thing about the pitch events. If you're in the audience or if you're moderating, like I usually do, is just to see all the new ideas. The companies, the types of companies that we see is limited only by the imaginations of creative people. It's amazing some of the things that they come up with.
How do you bring an event like that to fruition?
Well, first you have to live a long time, so you know a lot of people. You have to be in the valley for a long time, but fortunately we're in an area where there's no shortage of companies that would like to get an audience and would like to pitch. So that part tends to be the easy part. We're also in a place where there's really no shortage of investors, but there are a lot of demands on their time. So they need to know that their time is worthwhile, is being spent in a way that's productive, and that they're going to see some high quality companies. And that just requires having done this again and again and again. And then we put it out there, and it's actually not that hard.
So Roger, for the future, it sounds like you're going to do these again sometime in the future.
Yeah.
And how does a person learn more about upcoming events? Is there newsletters that you have? Or?
Well, I don't hide. I'm pretty easy to find, but we post all of these events on our websites, roycelaw.com. We also have a resource site called royceuniversity.com where we put content, because a lot of what we do is technical, legal, and business content, and we collect it all in this one online library. And then thirdly, our site Royce Link, Link, royselink.com, which is where we announce most of these activities. So you can find any of these. You can Google it. You Google my name, you'll see all sorts of events.
I'm visiting here today with Roger Royse. He is the founder of the Royse Law Group right here in the heart of Silicon Valley. We've been talking about startup companies, and Roger, we need to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages. And I want to get more into the trends in the Valley and what we see coming up.
Okay.
We'll be right back after these messages.
He's the world's most trustworthy man. Tax filing deadlines are scheduled around his vacation calendar. The IRS agent who audited his client apologized.
I don't always advise people on their taxes, but when I do, I save them every penny legally possible.
Groco CPAs and Advisors.
Come to Groco and stay wealthy, my friend.
Welcome back. I'm here today with Roger Royse. He is the founder of the Royse Law Group right here in Silicon Valley. Roger, we've been talking about startup companies, crowdfunding, and how companies get launched here in the Valley. There's a key and a secret sauce that you found in networking and marketing. What's your perspective and viewpoint? How does a person effectively network here in order to establish a good, solid company and growth? And what steps have you taken to help create your network?
It's funny you should ask me that. As I was driving over here this morning, I was listening to some songs on my iPhone, and I was listening to this song by Lady Gaga. I mean, don't ask me how that got on my iPhone. I don't even know. But I had this thought. It occurred to me. It says, Lady Gaga has something in common with Barack Obama and with me, because we've all created this community using pretty much the same process, the same pattern. And that pattern has to do with exposure, a fan base. It has to do with expertise and establishing that expertise. And it has to do with very targeted sort of high-level communities. And here in Silicon Valley, we really have the advantage of having access to a lot of networking opportunities. And like I say, it's really those three things. It's exposure, and it's expertise, and it's brand. And every startup company ought to follow that formula, and the successful ones do as well. If you look around at big brands and big companies, you'll notice they do tend to follow the same sort of pattern. They just run that play again and again as long as it works. So I think startup companies here, when I first came to this valley out in 1991, I remember my boss, he said to me, he says, I think you ought to be doing 5 business lunches and 5 business dinners a week, which is kind of a lot. But the point being that you really have to work, and you have to put yourself out there, and you have to be at a lot of these events. And you could very easily in Silicon Valley go to that many events every week, and you could meet a ton of people. And there is some value in that. That's working hard. I think there's a lot more value into being a little smart about it, where you go and what you put out. And there's a lot more value about working right. And just making sure that you're connecting with the right people and getting in front of the right people and using your time wisely. So that's it at a high level. To drill down a little bit, I think that the events that we do are really important. In fact, we have one coming up. I'm speaking on Thursday evening at Hacker Dojo in Mountain View for a meetup group called Idea to IPO on startup basics, where we'll talk about, and it's sold out almost immediately. We're trying to get a bigger space, so we might have to move that. But those are great events because you meet a lot of startup companies, you meet a lot of advisors, you meet a lot of people that are doing what you're doing or know people that might know. So part of it is just getting out and going to some of the events that we're able to do in Silicon Valley. The other part is having those private one-on-one meetings with the super connectors, such as yourself, and people who really can connect you with the people that you need to know. So don't get me started on this topic. I'll talk all day long.
But it is true. It's all about working smarter rather than harder.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when we talk about your company, you're now at 20 attorneys?
We're about 20, yeah.
20? You've really put a process in place that your brand is strong, You have some of the premier attorneys coming and joining your group.
Absolutely.
But let me talk in terms of the direction you see for Royse Law Group. Where do you see yourself, within a 3 to 5 year range? Keep on growing. Do you like the size that you're at?
I think we can probably just continue to do what we've been doing. I see continued growth. 5 years from now, I expect we'll be at 30 lawyers at least. We may double by then. There's plenty of room in this valley to grow, as well as our other offices. We have offices in San Francisco and Los Angeles that are pretty busy. I think Los Angeles is a place that could be a little better served by the legal community. So I go down there a lot, and I'm building that office, and that's probably the next thing. We've looked into other areas, the Central Valley, Sacramento, even Las Vegas. In fact, we're in discussions with possibly expanding into other states. So I see us expanding and doing our core business in new geographies and in new markets.
It's a competitive landscape there's a lot of attorneys out there.
Yeah.
But you found a secret sauce in terms of delivering a value-added service to the new entrepreneurs. Let me ask, a new entrepreneur comes to your company. What advice do you typically give them off the bat when they're saying, Roger, I'm just starting out. What do I need to know?
So, brain scientists will tell you that it's really hard for a person to hold two competing thoughts in their head at the same time. And when somebody walks into my office with a great idea, they're thinking about upside. They're thinking about all the success they're going to have, and they're going to go IPO in 3 years. It used to be 1 year, but now it's 3. And they're going to and the VCs are just going to love them once they see them. And I really do have to temper that a little bit and say, that's all great. I don't doubt you a bit. I'm sure it's all going to work out that way, but we really need to plan a little bit for the downside, just in case this particular idea doesn't work out. So number one, let's not put off good legal structure and having good legal bones. Let's have some asset protection by forming a company around what you do. Let's make sure that the people that you bring in are not entrenched if it turns out that they don't work out and they're not the right people. Let's make sure that you can pivot easily if you have to. And let's make sure that if you're going to fail, you fail fast, so you can start over with something else. And that's kind of what we as lawyers have to do. I see a whole lot more failures than I see successes, and we need to plan for that.
Roger, quickly, where someone wants to contact you, how they go about finding Royse Law Group?
We're on the web, www.rroyselaw.com with an S, R-O-Y-S-E law.com. Just Google me and we'll come up.
With current laws, we have left our children an enormous financial burden. Even though they may be too young to understand it. At Groco, we care about you and the ones you love, and the quality of your and their lives. Call us today to see how we can help. 877-CPA-2006.
Groco, helping you along the way.
Welcome back. I've been visiting with Roger Royse, and during the break, I talked to Roger about his next big project. And I asked him if he'd just stay where we can talk about it. The last time he was on the phone, he was talking about the book that he recently wrote called Dead on Arrival. It's an excellent book. You can get this on Amazon?
Absolutely, it's on Amazon.
Dead on Arrival. It's how you can avoid the legal mistakes that could kill your startup. But Roger, I'd like to talk about what is your next big project right now? What are you currently working on?
We have a couple things I'd like to mention. The big one is our Agritech conference coming up on May 12 in Palo Alto. That's technology companies focused on the agriculture industry. It's something I've been interested in for quite a long time, coming from an agricultural state, and also doing work both in the tech field as well as in the agriculture-related field. So a couple years ago, I formed a group here in Silicon Valley called Silicon Valley Ag Tech. We're doing our first conference on May 12, and we've just gotten a tremendous response to this. We haven't even really marketed it much. But people have found us. We've got over 100 paid signups, attendees so far. We've got tech companies. We've got established companies, large ag companies to small tech companies. A really good panels and presenters. Of course, a pitch session. Got about a dozen ag tech companies pitching I think the panel of VCs and investors is bigger than the panel of pitchers. We've got about a dozen of them that are going to be in the audience looking for the next big thing in ag tech. We have companies coming from all over the world. We have a company from New Zealand coming out here to pitch at our conference. We have a company from Ireland coming. And we've gotten calls from several other countries. So this is going to be a really, really great conference.
What's the trend in ag tech right now?
See, that's the great thing. It's such a broad field. We're seeing robotics, for example, that are helping create efficiencies in things like controlling crop yields and efficiency, water, pesticides, things like that. The big thing in my mind, though, for me, what I'm really interested in is the idea of big data in ag tech, because there's a lot of legal issues around that. Because traditionally, back where I grew up, a farmer could farm only about as much land as he could remember. In other words, he kind of had to know what area the land needs water and what needs a little more of this, and where the sand, the soil is sandy and where it's rocky, stuff like that. Well, there are tools now that will help them do that. So that means that the farmers can actually farm much bigger plots. That's one aspect of it. So data is one. The other thing is just collecting that data and using that data. And there's a lot of legal issues around who owns it, who has a right to privacy, is it a trade secret, how can we protect it? And that's the legal side of what's going on in that aspect of the industry. Water, of course, is big. As you know, we're in a drought, and water conservation is important. And we actually have somebody coming from CFDA that is going to talk about water conservation technologies. Someone from the state. So hopefully we'll see some companies that will jump on this and see this as an opportunity to do something to promote sustainability here in California, where we have a water shortage sometimes.
Water seems to be a big issue here. Roger, for a person wanting to get more information, it sounds like you just have a few more slots left on the Ag Tech conference, but where would they go to get more information, to get signed up?
Silicon Valley Ag Tech. So agtechsv.com. We're all over the World Wide Web.
I've been visiting here today with Roger Royse. He's the founder of the Royse Law Group, one of the top law firms here in Silicon Valley, focused on startups and helping companies get to the next level. Roger, thanks for being on today's show.
Thank you, Alan.